Welcome everyone. It is so great to be here with you today. I think it's time we kick off as everyone rolls in. Please do feel free to put in comments in the chat. Turn yourselves on mute if you don't mind. And without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to hand over to Jo to start the proceedings and get this ball rolling. Jo, over to you.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. I'm Joanna Platt, CFO at Vanguard in Australia. And on behalf of the Wills Committee, I'm here to welcome you to a panel discussion as part of our celebration of International Women's Day. As you may be aware, Vanguard has dedicated the month of March to celebrate the achievements of women at Vanguard and to stimulate discussion around how we can continue to build equality for women in the organisation and society more generally. If we look at the theme of International Women's Day globally, it's around choosing to challenge, which highlights that the work of improving diversity and inclusion is never done. It also points to making a choice around mindset and being part of the collective solution. Our panel discussion today will be based upon personal and practical stories and tips about how we can think about the challenge, the art of the challenge in building equality. Before I move on, I would first like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today, the Wurundjeri people. And I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. A couple of comments before I hand over to Alex. What does the culture of inclusion mean to Vanguard? As we all know, at Vanguard, we believe our culture of inclusion is essential for each of us to fully thrive in our careers and to provide superior value to our investors and our communities in which we live. That's why we're committed to providing a trusting, supportive environment in which all crew members worldwide feel a sense of belonging. We can see these qualities of inclusion, challenge, and a growth mindset reflected in our leadership standards. It's the very fabric of Vanguard. Turning to today's theme, how is challenging a spark that can create change? I think of challenge as something that we push ourselves against in order to grow. Anyone who goes to the gym knows that we do not become stronger unless we have resistance and a drive to make things better. How do we create resistance against our innocent habits where we may have blind spots in how we interact with others and make assumptions about the contributions and potential of women? And when we see a dynamic that we want to change for the better, how can we challenge in a way that creates a positive change rather than putting people off or embarrassing them? Finally, I'll just comment on the partnership between Vanguard and FEW. This event is being chaired by Alex Tulio, who is the CEO and MD of Financial Executive Women. FEW is an organisation that provides a community and digital platform for women who are progressing their careers in the financial services industry and want strong peer support, networking and group mentoring and tools that can support them in their career. Today is a great opportunity for you to see the work of FEW in action and for this to be a prompt to you to spend more time getting to know their resources and events in order to help you develop your career. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Alex, who will be leading our panel discussion today. Over to you, Alex.
What a beautiful welcome. Thank you, Jo. And thanks for the intro as well. Welcome, everyone. It's so good. I wish I could see all your faces. I do miss the in carbon form events, but we will get back there one day. But also doing it this way actually lowers barriers, I think, because so many more people can attend. And of course, as is evidenced, one of our amazing guests today is streaming in live from the US of A as well. So thank you for joining us. We don't have a lot of time. These sessions will go so fast because we have so much to talk about. So I'm going to kick off right now by introducing formally our amazing panelists today. And just to reiterate a couple of things, please do keep yourselves on mute, but also don't be shy. We have a chat function here. This is a really safe space for conversation, for challenge, dare I say, and for questions. That's what these ladies are very happy to do. So please, if you do have comments or questions, don't be shy. I will be facilitating those throughout. So without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce all of our panelists, which I'll do one by one, and then we're going to jump straight into the conversation. So let's start with our fabulous Joanna Platt, who's the Chief Financial Officer for Vanguard Australia and a member of the Australian Executive Team. In this role, Joanna is focused on Vanguard's financial operations at both a management and statutory level. She also leads the operational teams responsible for providing fund accounting, administration and transfer agency services for Vanguard's managed funds, exchange-traded funds and separately managed products. Prior to joining Vanguard in July 2017, Joanna gained more than 20 years of experience across the consumer goods, logistics and retail sectors. And in her most recent role was Iron Mountain's Chief Financial Officer for Australia and New Zealand. Joanna is a certified practicing accountant, a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and holds a Bachelor of Chemical Engineering from the University of Sydney and a Master's of Business Administration from the Melbourne Business School. Wow, welcome, Jo. And I'm going to get you to think about one of the highlights in your career to date. So I'll give you a bit of thinking time. Now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Shannon Nutter. Shannon is the head of proposition and experience for Vanguard superannuation business in Australia. In prior roles, Shannon led participant strategy and development for Vanguard's institutional business and has also served as head of institutional marketing and as head of market research and voice of client for all US and international businesses. She joined Vanguard in 2007 and has more than 15 years of experience in both consumer and B2B markets, focused on strategic planning, marketing, product development, business consulting, and market research. Additionally, Shannon originated and led the development of My Classroom Economy, a free program built by Vanguard volunteers that teaches children key life skills through experiential learning. Shannon earned a BA from Macalester College and an MBA from Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. Welcome, Shannon. And likewise, I'd love you to think about one of the highlights for you as you look back on your career so far. What's something that really stands out for you? Challenge, opportunity, what it can be, whatever you like, ladies. Next, I'm absolutely so thrilled to welcome Dr. Cortina Mccurry. Cortina is the CEO and co-founder of Kaya, Australia's first on-demand reproductive health and wellness platform, supporting women and families as they navigate life stages. Prior to launching Kaya, she was a partner of BCG, where she advised multinational startups and not-for-profits across North America, the United Kingdom, Africa, and Australia. She has spent her career across healthcare and operations, working with organisations such as Save the Children International, where she spent 2014 transforming global operations and supporting the humanitarian response to the Ebola virus outbreak. Cortina holds a PhD in systems neuroscience from MIT. Cortina, similarly, there's so many things that all of you have achieved. I'd love to know something that's a standout moment for you so far. And last, but absolutely not least, is Gail M. Carter, MBA. Gail is a global impact strategist, a successful leader and results-driven problem solver who focuses her impact on clean energy, leadership and personal development. She leverages her extensive career in corporate America and global nonprofits to create sustainable strategies that help clients to own their power in various areas of their lives. She's an international speaker, best-selling author, coach, and global philanthropist, originally from Barbados. Gail is the founder of Lightshift 360 and Illuminaire Solar, and the creator of the Renewal 360 Encounter and Serve Blueprint. Before becoming an entrepreneur, Gail worked as a professional engineer and senior manager on billion-dollar projects at Fortune 300 companies in the energy and construction industries. Gail has been recognised for her leadership, volunteerism and accomplishments by receiving the Junior League's Women to Watch Award, the People's Choice Award, and has also been featured in Courageous Women magazine and has been a contributing writer for We magazine for women. She's authored 7 published books and been a global philanthropist for 4 countries. Well, I don't know about all of you, but there's a lot to talk about here. And the first thing I would like to say is, anyone want some role models to see what these amazing women have accomplished? There are so many things that you've all accomplished, and to all our beautiful audience out there, you know, isn't it interesting how we always have such talented and accomplished women on this show? And I think all of you separately have said to me, oh, you know, it's not that big a deal. So I think this is one of the things as women is that we really downplay our achievements and just how fabulous we are. So Jo, now I've given you a bit of thinking time. Out of everything you've achieved so far, if you think about the context of this conversation, what it means to be a woman, what you've achieved in your career, what's the thing for you that you go, yep, that's a moment that I really reflect on?
Alex, it's quite a modest one. It was very early on in my career. I obviously started out of university as a chemical engineer wearing the hard hat. And within a few months and period of time, I realized that it probably wasn't for me in terms of the technical challenge and analytical challenge. And so I wanted to branch into a different career path. And I thought, who would want to take me on, given that I don't have that skill and background? So that employer that took that first risk with me and saw some potential and nurtured that was a really special moment and led to the privilege of being in the role I am today.
I love it. It's interesting, isn't it, the things that really make such an impression. And I remember my first opportunity with someone who took a chance on me, young, untested. So I think that's something I'd love to come back to as our role of leaders, to see that raw potential in people as well. Thank you. Shannon, what about you?
It's funny, I would say a highlight for me of my career has been starting my classroom economy. And I guess a funny part about that is it was never ever part of my job, right? It was something that, an idea that came up, was able to get people to buy in, and then was able to rally a whole host of volunteers who it was none of their job either, but everybody was passionate about it and came together, all sorts of disciplines to make this thing happen. And I think all of us now, now there's been subsequent leaders of this program, hundreds of crew who've been involved in it over the years. Now we can all look back and say, oh my goodness, we never imagined what it could become. But I think just that notion of being able to pull so many different talents together and get people to work together has been a real highlight for me.
I love that. And I know we were chatting about this the other day, and you used the word legacy, which I'd also like you all to think about, because I think this is also a really important thing. What do we all want our legacy to be? And that doesn't mean it's nothing to do with title, or even, as you've just said, Shannon, your job. It's, what do you want to leave as a legacy? I think as a leader of other humans, no matter how big or small, I think that's really important to come back to. Cortina, what about you? What stands out for you in terms of your achievements and journey so far?
Well, I was just reflecting on what you were saying about the bios of all the women that you're reading. And when I hear the bios of other women, it lifts me up. It gives me life, because it's always so exciting to hear what women are doing, but often it's true. We tend to downplay ourselves. And so when I saw the theme for this year's IWD, Choose to Challenge, it's probably my favorite of the last few years, because for me, I take it a step further than just challenging the things that we see in society, and even the celebration of the women who are out there, but also it's challenging myself and challenging my own, where am I holding myself back? Where am I unconsciously using language that's diminishing myself? Where am I unconsciously supporting businesses where they might not actually be aligned with my values? Where am I somehow unconsciously lowering my own expectations of what I can achieve due to fear? And so for me, it's really about choosing to challenge just mindset. And so if I think about my own career, I realize that's a constant struggle, but it's always taking it to the next level.
So good. And you've beautifully evaded talking about all your incredible achievements by saying that. But I think and I love this as well. I do love this we've already got into mindset, because I think this is kind of where it all begins and ends, really, isn't it? And I think beautifully you just talked about how we diminish ourselves. One of the things that I'd love us all to think about, and again, don't be shy, put questions in, is the word just. And this year, I have started to, the minute you tune into how many times we say the word just, and how often we use it to diminish what we've done. Oh, it's just this, or it was only. So this is one of my challenges for myself, just on a very personal level, is stop saying just. And it's amazing how many times we say it once we become aware of it. Gail,
Yeah.
what about you? You've also, I mean, gosh, you've achieved and achieving so much. Is there something that stands out for you in your journey thus far?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say I feel that we are each blessed to be a blessing to others. And, I had a lot of privilege coming to the United States from Barbados, and, rising in corporate America, being the only Black female manager in some of the companies that I worked in. But the accolades and the accomplishments aren't really the highlight. It was challenging the decision to leave corporate America and start a business that was the highlight. Because at that time, you know, people were wondering, well, you're making so much money, your career is moving ahead. Why would you choose to do something that's so different, not the norm? So that was a highlight for me, but it was driven through philanthropy is what really started that part, where within corporate America, I got re-engaged with working with a company where we got a chance to go to Haiti to install solar panels there. And I got a chance to go on my own to Peru to teach kids. And then through that segment of my life, I realized I had a bigger purpose and I was drawn to do something a little bit more positive in terms of inspiring people to really own their power, take ownership of what they really want to do and align with their why. So I love doing that right now. And I think that's where one of my highlights.
Oh, brilliant. So many things in here. So for those of you who know me, you know that my mind is going like there's about 1,000 questions I want to ask. So I think a good place to start, given that this roundtable is inspired by IWD, and let's talk about, I really want to talk about what inclusion means to all of you and to all of us, because as I was sharing with some of you behind the scenes, I had a very thought-provoking chat with a woman last week who said to me, you know, it's interesting because inclusion can feel like a one-way street, because it seems to be often, and this is, I think this is an interesting nuance which I'd love to also explore. You know, it's not the intention, but often inclusion can mean, let's make you feel more comfortable fitting in with us, whoever us is. Not always, but sometimes I thought, gosh, you know, I'd never actually thought about that in that light before. So I'd love to explore, you know, what does it mean, you know, to have a culture of inclusion? How have each of you, I'd love you to sort of reflect and share on, one, what it means to you as a leader, as you're trying to and being part of creating a culture of inclusion, and also perhaps where you felt, you know, this actually, it's, you know, it's not adding up for me. I'm feeling like I'm trying to get into a club that's not really wanting to let me in. Let's start with you, Shannon, if that's okay. I mean, what's your reflection on that?
Yeah, sure. I guess if I think about inclusion broadly, I mean, I guess the way I sum it up personally is, do you feel comfortable being who you really are in whatever environment that is, right? So can you come into the office and be your genuine self? Whether that's goofy or serious or really academic or good with numbers or not good with numbers, right? Do you feel that you can be honest and true and not have to hide or put on another persona? I guess that's how I think about it. And sure, have there been times when I haven't felt that way? I would doubt if any of us says no. Right. I mean, I think certainly in various company cultures, right, you come in and you get a feel for a landscape and you say, oh, gosh, I'm not sure I'm one of those people because I don't look like them. I don't do the same sports they do. I didn't come from the same background or same schools. And so it can be challenging to either decide for yourself, and I'm thinking of Cortina's challenging herself, right? That decide for yourself, am I going to try to fit this mold, or am I going to see if this environment will open up to me in terms of who I am?
I like that. And again, there's so much to that, isn't it? Because it's what we choose to accept and challenge. Cortina, as Gail's already, Shannon's already segued to you. What are your thoughts around this, around what inclusion means, and I guess where you felt challenged around this?
Yeah, well, I think a lot about inclusion and culture specifically, because it's really true. I think about my time at BCG and even now when I'm hiring, often it's easy to fall into the habit of saying, let's find people who are aligned with our culture, as opposed to thinking, how do we find people who are additive to our culture? So if I think about me even moving into BCG, so I came from an academic background, I have a PhD in neuroscience. So already I was different, because the majority of consultants, more than a decade ago, you would say they would all be MBAs. And so when I came in, I was considered an anomaly for BCG. Can a PhD cut it here? Is a PhD smart enough to be able to advise clients? Can we hire doctors and lawyers? And it's so interesting that when I came in, I was one of three alternative degree candidates, is what we called them at BCG at that time. And the other 45 were all MBAs. And since then, we've learned so much, and I've really pushed for this. So I was quite involved with diversity and inclusion at BCG. And now, having left BCG, I would have left BCG having had poets on my teams. We had ex-Marines, we had Olympic gymnasts. We had so many people who are bringing this massive diversity of perspectives. And so I think first thing to say is, I recognize that a company might have a culture, but what you're constantly trying to do is add to that culture, not necessarily keep it stagnant and the same.
I love that. And I think all this, and obviously our intention here is to provoke thoughts and have conversation, and they're big issues with a little time. So, but I think some of these conversations, even if it makes all of us go, wow, I had not thought of that perspective before, I think this is so worthwhile. And I think just what you said then, Cortina, it just made me think, the diversity comes in so many forms. And I think so often we're kind of restricted by, is it gender, and they're all important. But even just as you're saying, I was one of the alternative degrees that came in, and gosh, can you cut it here? Like, you feel that you don't fit in, and am I good enough? And can I make it here? So I think this is a great.
It needs.
Oh, sorry, if someone can just put themselves on mute there. But so I think, yeah, absolutely. I love that. Are people additive, not keeping it restricted and the same? Joe, I saw you nodding away as well. I'd love your perspective on this.
Alex, I was thinking of some of Cortina's comments, and I completely agree. I think it's this balance of, I think early in my career, I tried to adjust and fake that I really understood AFL scores, which is our football league, Cortina, and try and sort of join the conversation. And now I enjoy hearing a little bit, but equally I talk about what I enjoy and allow others to adjust to me. So I think it's feeling the courage to obviously meet people halfway, but explain and show who you are and your interests, and trust that acceptance and allow them to adjust to you.
I love that. And, I completely, being a Melbourne girl myself and having zero interest in football for ages, I just went, yeah, I go for the Blues, but no, I don't really care. And now I just say that. But aren't like there's small but big things we're talking about here? And I did want to, maybe all of you, and Gail, I want to come to you about this question of what inclusion means to you. But perhaps then the next thing we can talk about, once we've chatted with Gail about this, is I would like to talk about this concept of code switching, because, again, it can be around race and a whole different range of things. But I think even what you're saying there, Joe, is this is when we're adapting ourselves to fit in with a group or something that might seem small. But I think, Shannon, you said before something about, inclusion means being able to show up authentically as you. And I think that's one thing, I don't know about you ladies, that it's kind of, yes, you can say that, but God, it takes some wisdom and courage to actually do that, right? So I'd love to explore that with you next. Gail, from your perspective, so this question of what does inclusion mean? And I think, again, you're like the other ladies, you've had such a varied background. You've been in big corporate, you're entrepreneurial, you've moved countries. When we talk about what inclusion means to you, and obviously you work with leaders around culture and owning power and being yourself, what does this spark in you when you think about this question?
Yeah, I really feel how it resonates to me right now. It's around people feeling comfortable with themselves, being authentic, and not creating stereotypes. So the story that kept spinning in my mind just now when we were all talking was, I experienced a situation where I was around a lot of people in corporate America, and we were doing an exercise on stereotypes. And I was very, very surprised at how much unconscious bias or stereotypes we put on race, on gender, on titles. So how it specifically related to me, like the exercise was to go on a flip chart, and on the flip chart they had women, they had engineers, they had people from different ethnicities. Black was one of them. So I was so surprised to see the list of things that were listed there in terms of people's mindset of their stereotypes and their view on my race, my gender, and I'm an engineer. So talking about challenges, when I saw the list and how extensive it was, and I couldn't relate to a lot of the things on the list, I stood up. I stood up and said, you know, I'm an engineer, I'm female, and I'm Black. However, I don't see myself on this list. So I felt excluded. Of course, I was the only Black female person in the room at the time. But these were other people telling me what they see of me, which wasn't me. So I did not feel included. I feel that having culture awareness and talking through issues like that, and people just embracing other cultures, that's why I believe traveling around the world helps so much too, because it creates empathy and it just creates awareness so people don't have these false stereotypes.
And it's insidious, isn't it? It's insidious. And again, I think this is one of these things where often people will say, well, that's not my intention, but that's and again, God, there's so much to talk about. I feel like we need episode 2 of this already. So I'm going to throw it open. So I don't think it matters if we talk over each other. I mean, this is the beauty of a live panel event. So this theme now about, you know, not showing up as your full self, and really, what does it take, you think? You know, and I'd love to know all of your experiences, because again, I think this comes back to role models. Our amazing audience here will be at all different stages of their career, from emerging to senior and everything in between. And I know a lot of you out there, you're being very shy on the chat, but I know a lot of you will probably be sitting here thinking, gosh, you know, that sounds amazing and I would love to do that. And then there's the but word, but it's hard. I feel scared. That doesn't feel like people want me to show up that way. Like whatever's coming up, because there's so much in this to actually say, you know what, yeah, I show up as myself and I really don't care. I reckon it takes a bit to get to that point. So anyone can start me off here in terms of just some thoughts around, to spark a bit of discussion around this topic about how you do actually start to show up as your authentic self, and maybe the role that leaders have to play in making that feel safe.
I don't mind going on this because Gail said my favorite word, which is empathy. And so one of the things that I've absolutely learned, and it's just by nature of my experience, I grew up in Alaska, already isolated from the rest of the world. So you can say I grew up in a bit of a bubble. There's 600,000 people, right? That's a fairly small population across the US. But if we start with empathy, one of the things that I have learned over time as I've gone from Alaska, now lived in several different countries, been exposed to so many different types of people, I have what I call an I don't know mentality to life. So as much information as I have accumulated over time, as much as I learned, I would say going to MIT was probably the best test of this. I deeply, deeply understand the brain. I know my space of neuroscience incredibly well back and forth, but next to me, you'd have the astrophysicist, and you would have the person who was studying some obscure fluid dynamic element within biology. And each one of them was an expert in their field. So I developed this I don't know mentality, and I was comfortable with it because you don't have to know everything. The most important thing is to be curious, to have empathy, to seek to understand. I think the biggest problem with inclusion often comes from this perspective of the world that I see in front of me is all that exists. And that is the most limiting belief. And so if you can just let go of that now and have an I don't know mentality and say, I am curious to learn more. Whatever I see in front of me, it may be what I think it is, or it might be different. So I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to get curious. I'm going to be open. So empathy and an I don't know mentality is what I think is kind of the first step towards breaking through some of these barriers.
Love that. Have you ever, you know, can you recount when was that time when you went, you know what, this is who I am, this is who I'm showing up as? Was that a journey, or were you pretty much was that innate in you from the start?
Oh, wow. You know what? I'm going to call it a journey because it's one of those things where it's like a rubber band, right? I had to show up in the world as me. There's no one else. I can't change my skin. I can't change that I'm a woman. I often joke that I grew up in a bubble because I grew up in this space where I had these amazing, amazing parents who really instilled in us a real confidence in who we were, and it was quite grounded in what we were capable of. And there was a massive expectation that we could and should attempt to accomplish anything. Rah, 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 great. Now take this Alaskan girl and put her into the lower 48 of the US, where they're totally different space. And so I remember coming up against not my own beliefs of myself, but others' perspectives of what they thought I could do, and they had no idea. So that was really interesting. And then saying, oh, wow, this person doesn't think for some odd reason that I can't accomplish A, B, or C. So I took that as a challenge. And I would just continue to prove them wrong, prove them wrong, prove them wrong. So I'd say it's a journey. And at this point in time, I'm definitely much more comfortable in my skin because this is how I get to show up on the earth. Like I can change my hair, but I will stand out in any room, and I might as well just embrace it.
So it's so liberating when you get to that point, isn't it? Who else wants to jump in? I know, Joe, you had I think you were ready to say something before.
Yeah, happy to jump in. I think, as you say, listening for crew listening, particularly early in their careers, it can be daunting to think, how do I go to the position that Cortina expresses, which is a fantastic sort of self-actualization. So I say it's baby steps. Go into these discussions, share a little bit more about yourself, ask a challenging question, and expect sometimes it'll land, sometimes someone might not react, sometimes it might not carry as a conversation. That's okay. Just keep trying and take baby steps, and you'll find over time your confidence will grow. And I think it's a nurturing process that you'll eventually get there. And as we say, you come to full acceptance. And I think once you have that, then you can project that much more effectively in your role.
That is so good. Baby steps, journey, nurturing. We've got a brilliant question from Emily, which I want to come to. I want to hear from Gail and Shannon, though, first, and then we'll tackle Emily's brilliant question. Ladies.
Sure. My take on that is a little bit of what both Joe and Cortina said, but I want to take it from the self-love perspective. So I think it's a little bit of mindset there too, so that once we realize who we are and really love who we are and work on self-love, it kind of helps elevate who we are and being authentic in that space. Of course, it helps where we're in environments that are created that allows for us to be who we are and feel comfortable that way. So, it's important for leadership and colleagues to also just embrace the differences that we exhibit. But I really feel too that a little bit of self-reflection, self-love, and really engaging in who we are, but which is a process, because even now I'm going through that, transitioning from corporate to an entrepreneur, and I do too lose that authentic in myself, because sometimes I was sharing with you, Alex, I go through this imposter syndrome thing, and I'm like, where is this coming from? So in one facet of life, like I shine, but then in another one, I kind of lose who I am too, because it's new, it's different. And how do I fit into this? And who do I need to become to be who people want me to be here? So I think it's a journey. I think what Joanna was saying is correct. It takes one step at a time, and it changes as your journey in life goes on too. In one space, you're fine. You're comfortable because people know who you are, so you could be who you are or be authentic there. But you may start a new job, you may go to a different country, or something new may happen in life, and then you have to start that cycle again. But really knowing your strengths, your values, and your why, or why you're here, I really believe kind of creates that authenticity in oneself.
I love that. And you're right, Gail. We were talking the other day, we're going, damn, haven't I learned this lesson already? Apparently not. Something's just triggered it again, and here I am for the next onion layer to come off. Shannon, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do think it's a step at a time, and I think a little bit of ignorance can be good in some of these situations. I mean, I think back to my very first job out of college, and it was in a consulting firm, very traditional, and apparently no woman before me had ever worn a pantsuit, and I did not know this. And I did not want to wear a skirt to work every day. And I just showed up one day in a pantsuit. And only then did men tell me afterwards, like, wow, that was so brave. You wore a pantsuit. And I was like, what? Who knew I was breaking some sort of norm? I was just being me. So I think, sometimes ignorance is okay. Just do what you want to do. But I do think there's a bit of, hey, be yourself, but also be aware of how yourself impacts people around you. I was talking to a crew member here the other day that I'm a fairly candid, sometimes perceived as aggressive person. And, it has taken me time to go, oh, wait a minute. Sometimes I have a tone of voice that puts people off. I don't hear it. I can't hear when people sometimes sense that I'm angry. I'm not angry, I'm passionate about something and I get excited in talking about it. But I think it is that notion, be yourself, try to be yourself, but also be aware if you're sensing something from people around you, which may mean, hey, I have to adjust. It's not that I have to change myself, but maybe I need to be a little bit more in tune with how I'm impacting other people.
I love that. I think, well, one, I mean, who knew? The rebel with the pantsuit. I mean, wow, you're right. Blissful ignorance is definitely a good thing in terms of those sort of norms. But I think a great segue, all of you have touched on. So Emily, thank you for your question, because I think it is a brilliant question. And I feel like this is what this is a bit of the dilemma, right? So Emily's asked, can you be 100% your true self without taking into account your audience or situation? How do you balance out being your authentic self and tailoring your message to specific audiences? So I think this is a great question. I think, Shannon, you're really probably alluding a bit to this about self-awareness and being intuitive and empathetic to others around you as well. So again, let's just jump in there. I mean, what's some great insight, I guess, for Emily around this?
Happy to jump in. I find, sort of playing back some of those comments, that if I'm going into a discussion, I'm thinking about what my audience is thinking and feeling on a certain topic. How will my message land with them? And so how do I frame it in a way? I find it's more framing rather than the personality that I'm trying to express a point with. And so that's how I reconcile the two to make sure that I can be effective. But it's always a journey. Sometimes you fail at it, and other times you get it right. And so I think it's also just being kind to yourself, that each time you do it, you'll get better at it.
That's great. And I think you're right. I mean, it's not about doggedly going, this is how I am, and then being fixed in that also. I find it's as long as you're thinking of the other person, but I'm still being true to who I am and not being inauthentic. But that doesn't mean I'm like, well, bad luck, take it or leave it. You've got to be sensitive to others, is my 2 cents. Who else wanted to jump in some practical?
I'll just chime in. I think it's not always about not being yourself, right? So I think about, hey, you may be a loud person, but if you walk into a church somewhere when you're traveling, you're going to be quiet because that's what that place demands. It's sort of a respect for that particular environment. And I think the same, whether you're in a corporate boardroom or you're in another environment, right? There is a bit of a, what is the right way to show up for this particular environment, whether it's respect or whether it's, gosh, there's a big giant room of people, and so you're not going to be able to talk as much, whatever that might be, that your authentic self is showing up appropriately for that particular place. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily changing who you are. I guess that's how I think about it.
That's great. Gail, Cortina, anything you wanted to add to that one?
I feel like everyone said it all. I think, so maybe I'll just build on it to say, a specific example of this that I have come across in my career. At BCG, we tend to have what may feel like a hierarchy. You'll have your associates, your consultants, your project leaders, and you've got your principals and your partners. And one thing I would always say when we bring together a team of people where there's often associates who are on, and they'll see themselves as the bottom of the totem pole. And what I have to explain to everyone is it's not a totem pole. We are in a circle in which I need your ears and I need your eyes and I need your experiences, because the only way we're going to be able to solve this is if you're able to bring that to the table, give us a new way of looking at things. How do you get to innovation? You get to innovation by bringing in new perspectives, and out of those different perspectives, great ideas emerge. And so I'm going to just build off what everyone said, because I don't think it's about not being yourself. That's what you need to bring the world, right? You need to bring the world yourself, your gift, your experiences. Like I would say you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't bring that, but there is a question around communication and having that emotional agility and self-awareness to say, is my message landing? And then you can bring that back to yourself, which is you want your message to land with whoever you're communicating with, for it to land, because you think that experience, what you're giving them, is going to be helpful to them. So for it to land appropriately, you've got to know, well, where am I? Right? Am I in a church? That's a great example. Maybe I should just lower my voice a little bit. Am I in another country where instead of using the to form, I need to use usted? If you're speaking other languages, there's a way of formality. Am I in a place where it takes a bit of time for someone to get to feel comfortable sharing personal information until there's some rapport developed. Do I jump right in? Do I not? So that to me is more of an element around learning to communicate effectively. But I would say you actually have to always be 100% yourself.
I love this. And I think already, so I want to, well, not even change it up. I mean, isn't it amazing how all the things we're already talking about, like they're wide ranging, but there's some really strong themes here, I think. You said a word just before, Shannon. So I was pointing my pen at you then, I'll put that down. You said a word then about, sometimes you can be perceived as aggressive. So I want to pick up on this word. And I also want to pick up on what we're talking about here, which is around communication styles, sensitivities. I think, Gail, you said something before about showing up how people expect me to be. And actually, before we went live, I think, Gail, you mentioned we were talking about masculine and feminine and what that means and the balance of that, and how I think as female leaders, I've certainly felt it in my corporate career that you feel like you've kind of got to push hard and you've got to be that kind of tougher thing because that's what's expected. So let's talk about all of that in the context of leadership and different styles. And I think, Shannon, not to put you on the spot, but I'm pretty sure when we were having a chat last week, it was you that was talking about the need as a leader to really create space for others at the table, because if you want diversity and all the things we're talking about, often it's not the loudest voice, and it can be I think that's the role of the leader, is to have what we're talking about now, that emotional and social awareness and empathy to actually pick up and hear the voices that aren't maybe your style or are a bit softer. So in any of all that, I mean, I'd love to hear from all of you around your thoughts around leadership styles, having a style that maybe wasn't the accepted norm for the corporate leader, this sense of, showing up yourself as a leader, and also hearing all the voices that are in your teams and what it takes to do that. And anyone can jump in here.
Happy to go first, Alex. I find I'm at my worst when I'm at the table with the group and I'm trying to solve the problem with the group, because then I'm active and I'm interrupting the dynamic. And so a little bit as Cortina described, I'm at my best when I'm observing the group conversation and I'm watching for contribution. I'm watching to see if someone was inadvertently spoken over, or if an idea was taken and built by someone else, I want to go back and echo or amplify the originator of that idea. And so I think it's, as leaders, can we create the space for us to hover above the discussion and be almost the oversight role that helps facilitate that.
Brilliant. Shannon, I quoted you, so you have a right of reply here if I got that wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I think that's been a journey, certainly over my leadership career. I think when I started out, I don't know about any of the other women here, as a leader, you felt like you had to solve the problem. And as I've gotten older, I've realized, oh, no. I actually don't need to solve the problem. I need to bring the right, interesting group of people with the right experiences together, and they're going to solve the problem. And so it's really a matter of, how do I facilitate the right thinking at the table, get the right people involved and get out of their way, or clear the road in front of them to the extent that I can. But I do think sometimes you've got to, whether it's challenge the norm, challenge the idea of who should be involved, right? Because it might not be all the MBAs, it might be somebody else that really needs to come to the table. And so as a leader, really creating that environment that lots of different ways of thinking are welcome. And that you don't want to have this one mindset moving forward. You're not going to get the best solution.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk about, I think as a flow on from that, the role of a leader. I don't know about all of you, but I remember when I got my first leadership position, which is kind of many eons ago now, but there's no handbook, right? Like, no one says, great, now you do this. And I felt, and I'm not sure, I'd love to hear from all of you, because also we skipped a bit over imposter syndrome, having all the answers, the need to show up and prove yourself. I remember thinking, God, well, I've got this role, so they must expect that I know everything. And I think that starts to take you down this very pressurized journey of going, gosh, well, I don't know, and I don't want to look like an idiot. And, you know, and this is, I think this is what we all go through. And I think that's experience in time. As we've said, you start to get more confident, go, my favorite words now are, I don't know. I think that you were saying that before, Cortina. I don't know, but I do think this is important about for everyone of the crew listening, who are leaders, aspiring leaders, experienced leaders, whatever. The role of the leader, I'd like to just get into a bit more, because I think, you know, and again, I think it was you, Joe, or Shannon, one of you ladies said, you know, you don't always have to be running point. And like you just said, Joe, you don't always need to kind of be the one doing, you kind of hover above. How, as a leader, you know, for those listening who do lead teams and go, gosh, that sounds great, but I'm struggling to put down the tools and step into a different role. Have you ladies got any insights or tips around that transition? Because I reckon it's actually a pretty big one, especially for that first leadership role.
Oh my gosh, I can answer that, Alex, because talk about lessons that took me the longest to learn. Most people who know me will say this can't be true. Cortina's so nurturing and supportive and she builds people up. I'll just say not always. And so I do, that is who I am, but Cortina at her best is that. Sometimes Cortina at her worst, in her very first management role, where she didn't yet know that it wasn't about her and it was actually about the team, I was at my worst, because I used to believe, I remember this first management role, I was living in New York, still working for BCG, happened to be in Alaska at the time. I got a call saying, we need you in Australia. Can you be there next week? And I said, well, no, I can't even get to New York and then back. And they said, well, we need you to lead this case that we've got. And it was a retail case, which many of you might know. Retail is intense. It's intense, and it's some strong personalities, and it's a lot of that aggression, very masculine energy, I would say. And so when I was thrown into that environment as a new manager, all I could think was, I've got to deliver. I've got to have, you know, bring value to the client. I've got to perform. And I left my team behind in the process. I was burnt out. They were burnt out. We ended up getting where we need to go, but we didn't get there in a way that made me feel good. And I had to reflect on that as a manager. And I had to really think about, what is my actual role? How do I support the team? How do I actually create an environment where I'm supporting their well-being? I'm allowing them the space to bring the best of themselves to it. That was a journey. That was an absolute journey. But the way that I now do it is very different. And it starts with saying to them, I trust you, creating that environment wherein I am putting their well-being first, and I am looking to them to speak up. I'm sensitive to the needs. We have much more open communication. This is all very diffuse, because I could talk about, it would probably take an hour to really describe kind of the mechanics of it. But the most important thing as a manager was this shift in mindset, is that I'm not going to deliver the best outcome if I make it only about me. The only way we're going to get it is as a team. By the way, it's actually less work. Believe it or not, it's easier. It's easier that way. So I think just that shift of the role of a manager to more of a coach, to really support the team, is incredibly powerful.
I think that's going to resonate with so many people. And when you said you left your team behind, I remember a moment which I still cringe. And, you know, one of my first examples, I'm like, gosh, I've left the team in the rearview mirror. Like, not the intention. I think I'm a very people-focused person, but this is the self-awareness thing as well. Gail, I'd love to. Go.
I was going to add on to that, but you probably. So I wanted to say that, you know, I operated that way too, because we kind of have to prove ourselves, especially if we are managing older males too, right? So as a younger female, it was kind of like, well, the only way to get this point across is to be rigid, be strong, be forceful. And I was managing a team of project managers, and I would come to work every day very structured, get things done, very results driven. But I was driving my team away. And then one day I decided to do this values exercise with this. Like, we all went into this conference room, and they did an exercise so I can understand and rank our values. And what became enlightening to me was my values were so far from their values. They were valuing family, work-life balance. And here I am coming every day, you know, wanting them to work hard, stay late. This was completely conflicting. So it was when we realized how unique we are and in what drives us, it was very important to start aligning. But being present or aware of what it is that drives someone helps.
I love that. I mean, it's all perspective, isn't it? I'd love to, and I told you all this would go really fast, and it is going really fast. There's something I do want to talk about, which I think, and we're talking very much around this theme of choose to challenge, and I love that we've gone through, personal challenges, organizational roles, all sorts of things. The thing that I thought of when I saw this theme, and I also love it, but it can feel a bit hard. Right, because again, I feel like there's probably some crew out there going, well, I'm not kind of a challenger type person. The label of challenge feels like it's someone who's outspoken and confident, and I'm going to challenge something. And I think it's just important to spend a few minutes just talking about how we can all challenge and what that can mean for different people, and that it doesn't have to be standing on the boardroom table challenging aggressively. It can take lots of different forms. So I'd love to just quickly explore that. I mean, Shannon, what's your feel when you hear choose to challenge? Where does your mind go to say for your team and other people that you can think of?
Yeah, I guess I do think the word challenge can be a little off-putting to some people because it does sound confrontational in some ways. And so I guess the way I think about it is more about asking for things that are fair and for things that either you or other people deserve. So whether that's get credit for an idea, get an opportunity for a job, be paid fairly. Compared to others, who are doing similar work, right? I think that's more about fairness and, getting what you deserve versus being challenging, I guess, is how I think about it.
I love that. And before I go to the other ladies, I do want to ask you something, a bit of a deeper question there, because I think, say, getting paid what you're worth, that's fair based on peers. So I think that's probably something that a lot of people think about. What about having the confidence to do that though? Like, do you think that there'll be people out there going, yes, well, I'd love to do that, but if I rock the boat, there could, it could be a negative. Like, do you think there's a certain courage or environment where people have to be, given the space to ask for fair?
I think so. You do have to be a little courageous to go to a boss. I've done it. I've coached other people to do it. And again, with the mindset of, it's not about necessarily saying, I want more money, but saying, can you assure me that I'm being paid equivalent to peers who are doing the same kind of work? And if you can look me in the eyes and tell me that, I'm going to trust that that's a fair answer. So again, I think it's that notion of how do you come at that question? But it is a little nerve-wracking.
You know what? Yes, it does take courage, and courage, it can be micro courage, it can be big courage, whatever. Joe, I know you were going to jump in there. So in terms of this theme of challenge, what's your reflection around this?
I mean, particularly maybe on REM and those sort of issues, I think treat it as a business case. You often hear that advice around how to present yourself and your case, and then equally how you're framing the question, as Shannon says. So very much reinforce that. I know I have a practice, I almost prompt it with female crew sometimes. So how do you feel about your REM? And just sort of watch them squirm, because I want them to go through the process of discussing how they feel about it and how to frame it. So I think, again, if you have a leader that you feel you can trust and have those conversations, it's a good safe space to also practice.
Beautiful. I love that. Gail, what about you when you hear choose to challenge, and if anyone of the crew is going, oh yes, but I'm not kind of the challenger, I'm not confrontational, as Shannon was saying, like how do you interpret that, and what can we all do?
Yeah, I was just thinking just now, you can go within and just be creative. So think about it. What can you do to create something that? What was coming to me just now was so there's a shortage of women in the energy and the engineering space, but what I chose to do was form organizations within the organization, like business resource groups, so that people can come together and support each other and create mentoring relationships or whatnot to really help each other. So it wasn't like going and complaining or challenging, but really finding a way that we can all still work together in our own strengths. So that will help like the introverts, like they're not going to be vocal and challenging, but what can you do in your own unique strength quietly that can still add value collectively, right? So
love it. Cortina, what about you?
For me, I'm thinking a lot about what you're saying about how challenge can feel very aggressive, right, at times. And it doesn't always have to be. And what it takes me back to is, I think change starts from within first. And so for me, I think you can choose to challenge in ways that don't always require courage. They don't always require you yelling or screaming. And for me, I gave birth to twins last year. I had a fairly unfortunate medical situation where some things were overlooked. It led to my stitches being left in. Yes, I'll be personal for a moment with all of you. It led to a drain tube being left in. There was a lot on in 2020. And I'm choosing to challenge a system that doesn't always listen by talking about my story more openly. I'm not standing up and screaming and shouting, but if you want to talk about fairness, that wasn't fair. And there are problems that take place currently in our existing healthcare systems where women's voices are often not heard. And in my case, I told my doctor, I think you've left my stitches in. And he told me it wasn't possible. And I told him I could feel them. I said, I can feel the stitches. They're still in. And he told me, I don't know what that is. So I wasn't able to yell and scream. I was at my most vulnerable, right? But I have to speak out about it because the only way for change to actually start to happen and to ensure that another woman who might not have been here today, so in my case, I survived that, I have to talk about that story, and it doesn't always feel comfortable, but I am choosing to challenge it by sharing it and letting others know this is happening to women everywhere, all the time. So again, challenging doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't have to be obnoxious, it doesn't have to be aggressive, but I think it has to be true.
And thank you for sharing that. And yes, I mean, you've actually, I think this is a great note to end on because we have run out of time and I can't believe it. I feel like we're just getting started. But what you've just shared, Cortina, I think that's kind of the essence that might be comfortable, that might be a bit, vulnerable. This is how change happens, and this is how we support ourselves and other women. And the more conversations we have, the less these things feel uncomfortable. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to quickly go around before I hand to you, Jo, to just quickly finish up how each of you are choosing to challenge. So Cortina, you've just beautifully described how you're choosing to challenge by having these vulnerable and sometimes uncomfortable conversations about things that have happened to you in the bigger system. What about you, Gail? What's your choose to challenge?
Right now, so I'm in the energy space as well. So I'm all about getting females to get on board the energy industry and challenging our type of energy. So I'm challenging going renewable. That's what I'm doing in my space.
I love it. What about you, Shannon?
I would say I'm probably a constant of pushing, challenging assumptions, challenging norms in the organization, or now in superannuation, it's challenging norms in this industry, and continuing to speak up for others, right? I think that's always a challenge.
Beautiful. Jo, yours?
Challenging when we're looking at how we provide career opportunities to our crew based on their potential rather than their current experience. And so I think we can overly anchor sometimes in how we look at talent in that way.
Ladies, thank you so much. I know we're a minute over. I promised to get you out on time, but I feel like it was worth it to be a couple of minutes late. I think this has been such a brilliant conversation. Meg has just put in the chat a link for you to provide feedback. We're also going to have a highlights reel. I can't promise a blooper reel, but definitely a highlights reel for all of you to share. So thanks, everyone. And look, thank you, all of you amazing panelists. It has been an absolute privilege to chat to you today. And I really do thank your honesty and vulnerability and for being here, and also for crew. And Jo, over to you to sign off and finish up what I think has been a wonderful hour.
Thanks, Alex. So again, thank you to Gail, Cortina, Shannon and Alex for facilitating today's discussion. I think we heard some really strong themes that came through with universal echo. And really, I think around mindset change, being authentic, being sensitive to how we have impact, and to have quiet courage to make change every day and make it a consistent and persistent journey.